Good morning, everyone.
In unison, good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Major Jackson, you testified that at one point you met Janet at a salon in Brentwood, correct?
Yes, sir.
Were you in uniform?
Yes, sir, I was.
Were you on active duty at that point?
Yes, sir.
And were you working during the time period that you visited Janet at the salon in uniform?
I had just left my job for the day.
Okay, now, Janet began to live with you on a regular basis during what month and year?
Regular basis would have been sometime after November of 0. Let's see here. 02, I believe.
And she certainly was living with you from January through June of 2003, correct?
That is correct. Less the period of time between February and March where she was gone to Neverland.
Okay, but when she wasn't visiting Neverland, it was your belief that Janet and the children were living with you, correct?
They were living between my house, my apartment and the Soto Street apartment.
And most of the week, I believe you said approximately 5 days, they would live with you, correct?
3 to 5 days. It depended.
Okay, and did you ever tell any interviewing sheriff in this case that you were supporting Janet and the children during that period of time?
I don't recollect that. You'd have to.
Were you doing that?
There was probably in some ways I was.
In what way were you supporting Janet and the children during the period from January through June of 2003?
Well, of course they were sometimes staying in my house, my apartment. There was food, and she used my car sometimes. That's the best I can think.
Did you ever pay her rent?
I did pay her rent for her based on the money that she received.
And the money that she received was through welfare, correct?
I believe, assistance of some form.
And you were allowing her to deposit her public assistance checks into your bank account at Bank of America, correct?
2 times that occurred, I believe.
It actually occurred more than 2, did it not?
2 is what I remember. But if you say it was 3, okay, fine, I'm not going to argue with that.
Now, she received a welfare check from the County of Los Angeles in the amount of $769 on January 2, 2003. Do you remember that?
I remember a couple of welfare checks. I don't remember the dates, sir.
Would it refresh your recollection to just see that check?
Sure.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
And that was the deposit. It shows it being a deposit, correct? Not just cashing?
I'm not allowed to talk.
Okay, I see it went into the Bank of America.
Have you had a chance to look at the documents I just showed you?
Yes, sir.
And did you see a check from the County of Los Angeles addressed to Janet Arvizo dated January 2, 2003, in the amount of $769?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it true that you took that check, endorsed it, and deposited it into your Bank of America account? Right?
Yes, sir.
Now, your Bank of America account lists your home address at 450 South St. Andrews Place, number 307, in Los Angeles, correct?
That would be correct.
And that was the address that you described as being in Koreatown area of Los Angeles, true?
That is correct.
The welfare checks going to Janet Arvizo were addressed to her address at 802 North Soto Street, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you did that in January. You also did that. Excuse me. Let me rephrase. She received a welfare check on February 15, 2003, that you also endorsed and deposited into your Bank of America account, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that check was in the amount of $769, true?
Excuse me, yes, sir.
That check also was addressed to Janet Arvizo at 807. Excuse me. I said 802 before. 807 North Soto Street, Los Angeles, true?
Yes, sir.
Now, at some point, Janet became a signatory to your bank account, correct?
Yes, sir.
She wasn't a signatory to your bank account in January and February of 2003, right?
I don't believe she was. I'm really not sure when she actually did become a signatory. I know she did.
Now, in January and February the account was strictly in your name, true?
That would I believe that would be correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, on May 19 of 2003, Janet received a welfare check in the amount of $528.61 that you also appear to have deposited into your account. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Okay. Would it refresh your recollection just to see that check?
Sure.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
May I see that, please?
Okay.
Have you had a chance to look at that document?
Yes, I have.
And that is a check addressed to Janet Arvizo by the County of Los Angeles dated May 19, 2003, correct?
That is correct.
And you appear to have endorsed that check, correct?
Yes, sir.
And on that check, Janet Arvizo's address is 12643 Raymer Street, El Monte, California, 91723. Do you see that?
Yes, sir. I would believe that that's not a welfare check. I believe it's maybe some type of public assistance. But I don't believe it's welfare.
Was it a disability check?
I don't know, but I don't believe that was welfare. I believe she cut that off after the Jackson people closed her apartment.
Okay, now, approximately, let's see. Well, on May 5, 2003, she also got a check from the County of Los Angeles for $203.54. Do you remember that?
No, I don't. It may be child support. I'm not sure.
Would it refresh your recollection if I show it to you?
Sure. Yes, sir. I believe that's child support.
You've had a chance to look at that document, correct?
Yes, sir.
The document it's a check from the County of Los Angeles in the amount of $203.54, right?
That's correct.
It's addressed to Janet Arvizo at 12643 Raymer Street in El Monte, correct?
That would be correct.
And you did endorse that check as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. On May 5, 2003, Janet Arvizo received a check in the amount of $268.48. Are you aware of that?
I'm sure it is, if you've got it there. I'm sure it's child support.
And you endorsed that check as well.
Okay, sir.
True? Okay. Now, at some point did you learn that Janet Arvizo wrote to the Los Angeles County Welfare Authorities and said, "Stop sending me welfare"?
I believe she did, yes.
Did you actually see the note she wrote?
No, I don't think I did. But I believe that she did. I think she told me she did.
Now, you would agree that you were providing some financial support during January and February of 2003 to Janet and the family, correct?
You know what? She was depositing those checks into my account, and that was probably what she was using for support.
Okay. You were paying utility bills also for Janet, were you not?
Was I paying utility bills?
Yes.
I may have paid a utility bill.
Did you help the family out financially during, let me rephrase. During January and February of 2003, were you providing any financial assistance to Janet Arvizo and her children?
If I provided support to them during that period, it would have been from that welfare check.
So let me get this straight. You know Janet had a bank account at that point, didn't she?
No, sir, I did not.
Did she have an account anywhere, to your knowledge?
Not that I'm aware of. In fact, she was cashing her checks that she was receiving at one of these check cashing, and that's the reason it costs 6 or 8 or 10% to cash it. So I asked her, I said, let's cash it through my account, and that way you don't lose that money.
Okay. Do you recall writing any checks on your own to Janet during those first 2 months?
I don't, sir.
Do you recall writing checks to Janet at all during the early part of 2003?
I don't.
Okay. Did you ever provide any financial assistance to the children during January, February, or March of 2003?
I don't recall. If I did, I would have thought it was from the welfare money.
So your position is that the only money you gave Janet during January and February of 2003 was welfare money she had given you?
That would be my impression. I don't know any rules with regards to welfare. I wasn't concerned about that. She was my girlfriend, they were her children. If I gave them any money, it was because it was out of the goodness of my heart.
I understand that. My question to you is, Janet deposited welfare checks and then child support checks into your bank account at Bank of America in Los Angeles, correct?
Correct.
And this was starting in approximately January of 2003, true?
That would probably be true.
And are you saying under oath, Major Jackson, that the only money you took out of that account and ever gave to Janet and the children was Janet's own money?
Could you restate the question, please, a different way?
Sure. If it's not clear, I'll
Please.
rephrase it. Are you saying under oath that between January 2003 and May of 2003, the only money you gave Janet Arvizo out of your bank account was money she had put into your account?
Sir, I think I answered that, and that is that I don't know that answer. And that if I did give her money that would have been above and beyond what she was receiving, that would have been coming from me out of the goodness of my heart. Because she was my girlfriend and I did love her children.
Okay. And did she tell you at some point, I want to deposit welfare checks into you, Major J. Jackson's bank account?
No, sir, I'm the one that said, why don't we put it into my account because it will save you a little bit of money, from what little bit of money you do get.
Okay. Did you ever look at any of Janet Arvizo's welfare applications to Los Angeles County?
No, sir.
Did she ever ask you to prepare one of those applications?
No, sir.
Do you know whether or not she was honest on any application she sent to Los Angeles County involving requests for public assistance?
Janet's pretty honest, but I don't know that to be a fact.
Okay. Now, may I take just 1 second, Your Honor, to look through?
Yes.
During the time that Janet Arvizo was living at your home.
My apartment.
Your apartment. That was your home, right?
It's where I lived.
Okay. And we're talking about the period starting in January of 2003. You were being paid by the United States government, correct?
That would be correct.
And your base pay was $5,310.60, correct?
All object as irrelevant.
Overruled.
Sir, I don't have that in front of me. But if that's what my less says, then that's correct.
Would it refresh your recollection if I just show you the document we subpoenaed from the Army?
Sure.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Have you had a chance to look at that document?
Yes, sir.
Have you seen that document before?
I see my less monthly.
Okay. And let me restate the amount. The amount went up. Well, the amount of base pay you were receiving effective January of 2003 was $5,528.40 per month, correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. The amount of base pay you received in February of 2003 from the United States government was also $5,528.40 per month, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the amount of base pay you received from the United States government in March of 2003 was $5,528.40 per month, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the amount of base pay you received in April of 2003 from the United States government was $5,528.40 per month, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you recall whether or not you ever requested any type of housing allowance or assistance from the United States government because Janet Arvizo and her 3 children were living with you?
It would not matter. I could not request assistance from the government unless I married her.
Okay.
So that would have occurred in May of 2004.
Okay. So you didn't do it any time in 2003?
No, sir, I wouldn't have been able to. It wouldn't have mattered if I did it, and I wouldn't have done it.
Okay. Okay. Was it your understanding Janet Arvizo had no other bank accounts on her own? Excuse me, that's a poor question. Let me rephrase. Was it your understanding, Major Jackson, that in the months of January, February, March and April of 2003, Janet Arvizo did not have any bank account?
Yes, sir. That would be my recollection.
Okay. Do you know if she ever had an account at a bank called Providian?
No, sir.
Okay. Did you ever discuss with Janet Arvizo whether or not she had ever obtained any money from a J.C. Penney settlement?
No, sir, she did not talk about it. I started learning about it through the news.
Okay. Do you know whether or not, during January, February, March or April of 2003, Janet Arvizo was making any deposits in her mother's account at Sanwa Bank?
I'm not aware of that, sir.
Were you ever aware of any account that Janet Arvizo had set up at any bank involving monies she had obtained for the benefit of Gavin?
No, sir.
Okay. And were you ever involved in any fundraising efforts for Gavin?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, are you saying that the money you received every month during January, February, March, or April was not used for the benefit of Janet or the children?
Objection. Vague. His paycheck?
Yes. I'll rephrase it. Counsel's correct.
Please.
The base pay you earned from the United States government in January, February, March, and April of 2003 was never used directly or indirectly for the benefit of Janet or the children, correct?
Cannot answer that question with accuracy.
Okay. You testified yesterday that at one point Janet Arvizo went to court in downtown Los Angeles to deal with her domestic issues involving her ex-husband David, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you know approximately when that was?
That would have been right around the time of, it would have been in the middle of March.
Okay. Would that be March of 2003?
Yes, sir.
Did you know whether or not Janet Arvizo filed an income and expense declaration in that court case that you've just described?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay.
I did not. I'm not even sure what that is.
Was any of the welfare money or child support money that was deposited into your bank account during January, February, March, April of 2003 ever used for your benefit?
No, sir.
Okay. And do you know whether or not Janet Arvizo ever disclosed to welfare authorities in the county of Los Angeles that you were helping her pay rent?
I do not know. I just know that when the apartment got taken away from her by Michael Jackson's assistants, she apparently at that time wrote a letter to them and just canceled her welfare.
That's not really answering my question, now, is it? That's something that you just wanted to tell the jury, correct?
Okay.
Objection. Argumentative.
Counsel.
I withdraw it. Let's talk about the checks you wrote to Mr. Trujillo when you were paying her rent at her apartment.
All right.
Do you know whether or not Janet Arvizo ever disclosed the rental payments you were making on her behalf to welfare authorities in Los Angeles?
Sir, I believe that those checks that I wrote to Mr. Trujillo for her apartment on Soto Street were in relations to the welfare checks that she was receiving in the January, February timeframe.
So what you're saying, Major Jackson, under oath to this jury, is that you can guarantee that the rent checks you wrote to Mr. Trujillo on behalf of Janet Arvizo to pay rent came directly from her welfare checks. Is that true?
I remember. You need a yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. I can't answer that, yes or no.
Okay. All right. Do you know whether Janet Arvizo ever disclosed the financial assistance you were giving her on her income and expense declaration that she filed in her domestic relations case with David?
Did I not answer that already, sir? I said I don't even know what that document is, so I did not know that.
Okay. And you didn't help her ever prepare a document like that, correct?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay. Do you recall during January, February, and March of 2003 whether or not Janet Arvizo was depositing any checks into your account other than welfare and child support?
Well, she probably. The child support began at some point after that, but I'm not sure. I'm not clear when that started, so I don't want to say it started in March. But it was soon thereafter, I think.
Do you recall, during January, February, March, and April of 2003, endorsing for deposit any checks written to Janet Arvizo that were other than welfare and child support?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. During January, February, March, and April of 2003, were you aware of any bank account Janet had set up at a bank called Washington Mutual in Los Angeles?
No, sir.
During January, February, March, and April of 2003, to your knowledge, was Janet Arvizo driving an automobile?
No, sir, she was not.
Did you ever learn at some point that she had purchased an automobile?
I believe at some point she later told me that she had put some money down on a car and then opted out of it.
Do you know when that was?
I don't.
Okay. During January, February, March, and April of 2003, to your knowledge, did Janet Arvizo ever obtain any disability assistance from the state?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And during January, February, March, and April of 2003, to your knowledge, did Janet Arvizo ever obtain any food stamp assistance?
I did see food stamps, yes, sir.
Okay. And was that during the time she was living with you?
That was the time that she was visiting me at Bundy, and that was prior to November of 2002. And I'm not sure exactly when that stopped.
Okay. Were you, excuse me, did you know Janet Arvizo in November of 2001?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay, when did you first meet her?
July of 2002.
Now, in January, February, March and April of 2003, were Devellin, Gavin and Starr living at your apartment at least part of the week?
Well, of course in February and March they were gone almost the entire time. At least through the middle of March. But January, some of February and March, Devellin was not living with us, and Starr and Gavin were living with us when Janet was there.
Okay, alright. And what I think you've told the jury is that Janet wanted to keep the Soto Street apartment but Mr. Jackson's people prevented that. Is that what you're saying?
I know that. I believed that we wanted to keep the apartment, so that is what I say, is that before she was whisked off to Miami, our intention was for her to keep the Soto Street apartment.
Okay. When the Soto Street apartment was no longer rented by Janet, did she and the children live with you full time?
When the Jackson people shut down the apartment, she moved into my apartment after she left Neverland.
Okay. Did you ever wonder why someone on welfare wanted two residences?
No, sir.
Did you ever discuss with any prosecutor before you testified in this trial you're having deposited Janet's welfare checks into your account at Bank of America?
No, sir. It wouldn't have been an issue.
How do you know?
It's not an issue.
Objection. Argumentative.
Sustained.
What does that have to do with anything?
Have you ever discussed with any prosecutor before you testified in this trial anything about Janet's obtaining welfare assistance while she lived with you?
Wasn't my concern, sir.
Has any prosecutor or sheriff ever showed you before you testified in this trial any documents relating to any kind of public assistance Janet Arvizo was receiving at any time from the County of Los Angeles?
No, sir, not that I recall.
And has anyone associated with any prosecutor ever spoke to you on the phone about Janet Arvizo's receiving public assistance while associated with you?
Not that I can remember, no.
Okay. To your knowledge, was Janet Arvizo receiving any welfare checks in the year 2002?
I don't know, sir.
Do you recall depositing any of Janet Arvizo's welfare checks into your bank account during the year 2002?
If you have that, then I guess I did. I just don't remember.
Okay. Did you have any discussion with Janet at any time about why welfare checks were going through your sole account?
Please restate the question.
Sure. Did you ever have any discussions with Janet Arvizo at any time as to why welfare checks were being deposited into your sole account?
Any check that would have been deposited in my account would have been to save her money from putting it through one of those check cashing places that charge 6 to 8 to 10%.
Did you ever wonder why Janet didn't have her own bank account, to your knowledge?
No, sir, I didn't.
No further questions at this time.
All right. Redirect.
Mr. Jackson, Major Jackson, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Zonen.
Do you recall the phone number that you had when you were living at the St. Andrews apartment? This is a challenge, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Would it help you to recall that phone number if I were to show you a phone bill?
Yes, sir, it would.
May I approach the witness? I'm just going to show you something.
Okay, yes, sir, that is.
Tell us what that phone number is.
Oh, great. 213-213-739-9279.
You now remember that?
Yes, sir, I do. But don't walk away and ask me again.
Mr. Mesereau had asked you questions about checks that you deposited into your account. Do you know where your wife, then your girlfriend, Janet Arvizo, was depositing checks that she was receiving for public assistance at that time?
She wasn't. She wasn't depositing them, as far as I know. She was cashing them at check cashing places.
Do you know which places she was going to?
Not always. Sometimes we'd be going down the road and we'd stop at one of them on the side of the road.
Did you have a discussion with her about the cost of doing that?
Yes, I did. That was the whole issue. I said, they're charging you 6 or 8% to do that. Why don't you just deposit it into my account and I'll either write the check for your bills or I'll give you the money. I'm not sure which one I did.
Mr. Mesereau asked you about paying her rent.
Yes, sir.
How were you doing that? Where was the money coming from that you were writing checks?
From my Bank of America account.
All right. And then the money that was coming into your account from the welfare check?
Yes, sir.
Was that covering it?
Yes, sir. I believe the check was like $425.
Give us a sense. The rent was about how much per month?
$425.
And the public assistance check was about how much?
$700 some.
And then did you write checks for utilities as well?
I believe I did, but I'm not absolutely positive.
Was that covered as well by the amount of the welfare checks?
Yes, sir, it was.
Do you know how she was paying her utility bills before?
I don't.
Did you ever see a checking account in her name?
No, sir, I did not.
Did you ever see her sit down and write a check?
No, sir, I didn't.
Did you ever see her with her own car during the time that you were dating her?
No, sir.
Do you know how she was getting back and forth?
Bus.
When you met her at one of the kids' military events, is that correct?
That's correct. Where I worked.
And where you were working at that time was where?
It's at 311 Cuz Com in Los Angeles, West Los Angeles, in the Sea Cadet Command and located within the building.
And what would be involved in taking a bus from where she was living at that location?
You know what? I don't know how long it would take. But it was quite a long distance, so probably several hours to get there.
At any time during the time that you were dating, did you see her drive her own car?
No, sir, she never had her own car.
You said that both of you wanted to maintain the Soto Street apartment in East Los Angeles?
That is correct.
Tell us why.
Primarily, it gave her a good place to go to when she was visiting her mother. She had some stuff that she had in the apartment that she was storing. And basically, she just didn't want to give that apartment up because she really didn't feel that she was living with me. She was living there, but she was visiting me.
Do you know when it was that she sent a letter that discontinued her welfare?
I don't, sir. I don't know exactly. I just heard about it.
If I were to show you a copy of that letter, would that refresh your recollection?
It may. I'm not sure.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Actually, I have seen that letter.
Does that letter refresh your recollection?
Yes, sir.
And what is your recollection?
You know, I remember the letter, but I'm not even sure when I saw it.
Do you remember when you stopped depositing welfare checks into your account?
I don't know exactly when I stopped, because there were the child support payments coming in, so I was not concerned about it. I didn't know there was an issue with a welfare check versus a child support check versus anything else.
Were the child support checks of a different amount than the welfare check?
Yes, sir, they were.
Was the welfare check pretty consistently in the 700?
They're not hearing you, counsel.
I'm sorry. The question previously was,
Is your microphone on?
He had his book on it.
I had the book on it, I'm sorry. I apologize. The welfare check, was that a fairly consistent amount every month?
Yes, sir. I believe it was $700-something a month.
The child support check, would that vary or was that consistent as well?
That varied. Always low.
The amount, the check that Mr. Mesereau showed you that was in May.
Yes, sir.
Did you believe that was a child support check?
I'm sure it's a child support check.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask the court take judicial notice of the fact that February 15, 2003, is a Saturday, February 16, 2003, is a Sunday. And I have a copy of the calendar to furnish the court.
Sure.
No objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right. I'll take judicial notice of those dates and days.
You were asked yesterday by Mr. Mesereau whether or not the children went to school on February 15 and February 16 of 2003. Did the children traditionally attend school on Saturday and Sunday?
No, sir.
I'd like to ask you questions about your discussion with Frank, wherein he offered you a house, and he offered you children's education, subsequently then asked if you were still waiting for a house.
Right.
Tell me about your view of that offering of a house. How did you take it at the time he offered it?
The way I took it was, he wasn't offering to show me the contract. The bottom line was I really did not believe him. I did not believe that he was going to give us a house. I did not believe that he was going to give a college education. All of this was just talk. That's the way I felt about it at the time.
Why did you want to see the contract?
I wanted to see what it was that the family was being required to do, and what rights they were signing away.
You had the opportunity to listen to the tape of the Miller interview. That interview that took place in your home on presumably the 16th of February?
Yes, sir.
At the very beginning everybody introduced themselves and you were not one of them, is that correct?
That's correct.
Were you a witness to that particular event?
I did watch parts of it.
Were you not asked to introduce yourself?
No, sir, I was not.
Were you still in the room at that time?
Yes, sir, I was in the room.
Did you leave the room at different times?
I did, sir.
At one point you were asked by Mr. Mesereau whether or not you stated to the grand jury that you watched the entire proceedings.
Correct.
At another time he said, "Did you state to the grand jury whether you had listened to the entire proceedings?"
Correct.
Did you listen to the entire proceedings?
No, sir. In fact, when they played, I didn't really know much of anything was on there. I don't recall.
I'm sorry. Is there anything that you heard on that tape that you do recall?
The only thing that I do recall is something. They were praising Michael Jackson, saying he didn't touch them, something to that effect.
At any time did you make an attempt to discuss with Janet Arvizo at the time, during this February and March period when she was at Neverland, what was going on?
Janet did not talk much. She would not explain to me why she was emotional, why she was crying. She wouldn't tell me what was going on during this period.
Did you make an attempt to contact police during that time?
Yes, sir, I did.
Who did you call?
After a short phone call with Janet where she appeared to be under duress, I made a phone call to the Santa Barbara Police Department. It was late at night, and they transferred me to the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department.
And did you talk with a deputy at the Sheriff's Department?
I talked to a sergeant.
Do you know his name?
McCadden, I think. McCadden or something like that.
Did you tell him about what was going on?
I was confused. I did not know what was happening. I talked to him. I initially tried to explain to him that I had a family that was at Neverland, and they appeared to be under duress. He didn't want to believe. Is this a crank phone call? What was going on? I tried to say, look, I'm in the military. I'm not playing. They were on TV. Basically he finally said, well, why didn't she call 911? And I said, well, I don't know why she didn't call 911, because she kind of hung up on me, and she made some kind of statement like, oh, my gosh, here he comes, and she hangs up on me.
Major Jackson, the next day, did they call you back, from the sheriff's office?
Yes, sir, they did.
And was Janet home at that point?
Janet was back in El Monte.
And did you indicate to him that everything was under control?
I did. He said, is she back? I said, yes, she is. And that ended the conversation.
On a couple of occasions Mr. Mesereau referred to your house in West Los Angeles?
Correct.
Did you have a house in West LA?
No, sir. I had a 2-bedroom apartment.
Was this an apartment that you lived in with Janet Arvizo?
Yes, sir, I did.
And how many of her children?
2 of her children, Gavin and Star.
And where was Devellin living at that time?
She was living with her grandmother.
Did she visit?
Yes, she did. Pretty much every weekend.
So she was there for the weekend?
Yes, sir.
You indicated just now that, or earlier this morning, that at some point, Janet Arvizo became a signatory to your account.
Yes, sir.
Do you know when that was? Were you already married?
I'm not clear on that. It may have been after we got married, but I'm just not sure.
Mr. Mesereau asked you about amounts of money that you were making and described it as base pay. What does that mean, base pay?
Base pay is, in the military, you're given base pay, which is basically your salary, which is taxable. And then you're given a housing allowance, which is non-taxable. And you're also given a food allowance, which is non-taxable.
The base pay that was described, was that the amount of money that you received before or after taxes?
Before taxes.
So taxes are deducted from that amount of money?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mesereau asked you about a Washington Mutual account established in 2003. Are you aware of any such account?
No, sir.
Did Janet ever mention to you a Washington Mutual account?
No, sir.
Did she ever write a check on it in your presence?
No, sir. I never saw a checkbook.
I'm sorry?
I never saw a checkbook.
You never saw a checkbook.
So I know nothing about it.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Major Jackson, you called the police on Tuesday, February 11, 2003, correct?
I don't have the specific date in front of me, but I believe it was right around that time. Yes, sir.
You told the police your girlfriend had flown to Florida with her children, right?
Miami, correct.
Okay. You told the police that you'd received several telephone calls from her during the last few days, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you were concerned about her welfare, correct?
That is correct.
You then, after discussing the situation with the police, you and the police officer concluded that Janet appeared to have unfettered access to a phone, true?
That she had called me, absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay. And after your initial call, you received a call back from the police, true?
After talking to the police, Janet called me back and I told the police officer to call me back.
Okay. And a police officer called you back, correct?
He did.
You told the police officer in that conversation that Janet didn't think a 911 call was needed, true?
I did not tell him that.
Would it refresh your recollection if I show you a copy of the police report?
I've seen the police report.
You're aware of what the police officer says you said, correct?
I am.
And you're saying you never told the police officer, Ventura does not think a 911 call is needed at this time.
I told the police officer that Janet said she was going to be leaving the property in a vehicle at 12 o'clock, and that could the police intercept the vehicle. And his response was, we cannot intercept a vehicle.
Do you remember telling the police officer in that second conversation, Jackson said he did not think Ventura was in any danger?
No, sir, I don't.
Would it refresh your recollection if I show you the police report?
I've seen the police report.
You've seen the words he wrote about what you told him?
Yes, sir.
So you know the police officer claims you said, Ventura is not in any danger, correct?
Correct.
And you're denying saying that, true?
I'm denying saying that.
Okay. Now, you told the jury at one point Janet left the property, correct?
Please repeat the question.
Yes. At one point, after your call to the police, Janet left the property, right?
That is correct.
And when was that?
She called me early in the morning, so it was sometime that night.
Okay. And is that the night of the day you made the phone call?
I made the phone call late at night, so it was early that morning.
And, okay, so early that morning, she left Neverland?
She left Neverland.
And how did she leave Neverland? Do you know?
I don't know for sure. I know she went to El Monte.
And you also learned that shortly after that, she went back to Neverland, right?
After that, she came back to my apartment.
And did she then go back to Neverland again?
She received a bunch of phone calls from Frank.
Please answer my question, Major.
Yes, sir, she did go back to Neverland.
Okay, and approximately when did she go back to Neverland again?
It was probably a couple of days. I don't have a specific, it was probably 2 days.
Okay, so you call the police. They don't do anything?
Correct.
You deny what they claim you said to them, that she wasn't in danger, correct?
Objection. Argumentative and asked and answered.
Sustained. Asked and answered.
She leaves the next day from Neverland, right?
She leaves in the middle of the night.
Okay, and goes to El Monte?
Correct.
And then to your place, right?
Not that day, the next day.
And then goes back to Neverland, right?
Bunch of phone calls, and she
goes back
to Neverland.
And then when does she leave Neverland again, to your knowledge?
She leaves Neverland that same day, same night. She comes back late at night, by herself.
And does she ever go back to Neverland again?
After some phone calls, about every 15 minutes getting phone calls from Frank.
I'm just asking you the question, Major. Did she ever go back to Neverland again?
Yes, sir, she did.
After your calls to the police, she leaves Neverland and goes back 3 times, is that correct?
She left Neverland, I'd have to count it up.
Sound like 3 times to you?
Objection. Asked and answered. Argumentative.
Overruled. You may answer.
Okay, I believe it was 2 times. One time she returned with her family. The same night she showed back up, and then she returned again to Neverland.
How many times after your call to the police do you believe Janet left Neverland?
The night that I made the phone call to the police, she left that night. Came back to my apartment. Went back to Neverland, and came back again that night, so there was 2 times.
Did she ever go back a 3rd time, to your knowledge?
She did go back.
So then she left a 3rd time?
You're giving me the numbers here. Let's see. She came back, she left Neverland, went to El Monte. Alright, so that's leaving Neverland once.
Right.
She came to my apartment.
Right.
Lots of phone calls. Went back to Neverland. Came back that night. Okay, again, bunch of phone calls, and she returned back to Neverland. So that would be 3 times, yes.
Okay, and every time she left Neverland, how was she transported? Do you have any idea?
How she left Neverland?
Yes.
I don't have any idea, no, sir.
Do you know who drove her every time she left Neverland?
I think I learned this after the fact, but I think Chris Carter brought her to my apartment when she came by herself.
Every time she left Neverland, someone employed by Mr. Jackson drove her, correct?
I'm not clear on that, but I think that's probably true.
Objection. Speculative.
Okay, no further questions.
I'd ask to reopen on an area that is beyond the scope of the redirect examination, very briefly.
All right.
Major Jackson, following Janet's return to your home on the final occasion.
Yes, sir.
In March at this point, were you witness to any contacts from anybody by the name of Johnny?
Johnny, yes, sir, I was.
All right. And who do you understand Johnny to be?
Johnny was supposedly either a security detail for Michael Jackson or somebody that worked for Michael Jackson.
And where did you see him?
I saw him on several occasions.
And where was the first one?
The first time, I believe, is once the family returned back to my apartment on St. Andrew's Place. Johnny apparently was showing up at the apartment and banging on the door, and the family was scared. Janet called me at work. And I rushed home, and I got into the apartment and, the kids were holding knives. They were scared to death. And then all of a sudden we get a knock on the door and I opened the door, it's Johnny. So I slammed the door behind us, because I was concerned what he may do. And him and I were standing right nose to nose looking at each other, and I'm like, what do you want? And he said, I just want to know how the children are. I said, well, the children are fine. Get off the property. So he kind of looked at me and just walked away, so he left that day.
When's the next time you saw him?
Again, my wife called me from, at work, and at that time I guess she was my girlfriend, and said, Johnny is back. So I came back home. Came home again, and this was early evening. It was dusk. I pulled into the carport, and the garage door closes. It's like a chain link fence. And I look out, and across the street is this guy trying to hide behind a car. And from a distance, it looks like Johnny. So of course.
Objection. Non-responsive and narrative.
Narrative. Sustained.
Did you go out to look at the person behind the car?
Yes, sir, I did. I walked out towards him and he immediately took off.
Were you able to see him?
He had the same makeup and build of Johnny, but I cannot say for a fact it was Johnny.
Did you see what kind of car he was driving?
No, sir, I did not. He ran behind a building and took off.
When was the next time you saw him?
The next time was, Janet was concerned about the children going back to school because the Jackson folks had her passports for the children. So she did not let me back up. She went to the school. She was scared the children would be taken.
Objection. Objection. Move to strike.
Stricken.
Tell us the next time you saw Johnny.
I saw Johnny at John Burroughs Middle School.
About how long was this after Janet and the children returned to your home?
2 or 3 days.
Where did you see him at the school?
I pulled in with Janet, we parked. I walked up to the breezeway where the children come out, because we didn't want them to be snatched, and...
Objection. Move to strike. Non-responsive.
Sustained. The last part stricken.
You walked up to the breezeway. What did you see?
Okay. I was standing there waiting for the children. Janet came running up to me and she said, "Johnny is here." So I immediately ran out back to the car, grabbed a camera out of the car, because I wanted to get some kind of documentation that this guy was stalking this family. And I ran up to his car, and he was in an old 280Z or 280ZX. And I was my adrenaline was flowing, so I didn't turn the camera on, but I ran up to him and I acted like I was taking pictures of him. And, John Burroughs, it's a very tight situation there. Once you get in, you can hardly get out, and so he's slinging the gears back and forth, trying to get away, but he can't get out, because it's all blocked up. So I continued to take pictures of him, then I ran back over to the school, and I saw one of the counselors by the name of Mr. Davies. And I said, "Mr. Davies, there is a guy out here who is stalking Gavin and Star. And I don't know whether he saw that guy or not."
Objection. Non-responsive. Narrative.
As to the last sentence, I'll strike it.
Okay, so.
Ask the next question.
Yes. Did you point out Johnny to Mr. Davies?
Yes, sir, I did.
Were you actually in a position where you could see Johnny at that time?
Let me back up. I did not point him out. I said, there is a guy out in the parking lot driving a 280Z that is stalking the children.
Okay. Did you give him a description of that vehicle?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Including the color of the vehicle?
And, I'm sure I did. I can't remember now in my mind. And maybe it was a dirty gray or blue, but that's speculation at this point. I don't remember the color.
Did you give him a description of Johnny at all?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right. Did you see Johnny again thereafter?
I don't think I saw Johnny again.
Were you or Janet Arvizo receiving phone calls during that period of time after the kids finally and ultimately returned home?
Objection. Leading.
Overruled. You may answer.
I know Janet was receiving some phone calls.
All right. At which residence?
At the St. Andrews apartment.
That was your residence at the time?
That's correct, sir.
Were you answering any of those calls?
No, sir, I was not.
Your Honor, if I could approach the witness.
All right.
I'd like to show you exhibit number 26 for identification not yet in evidence. Can you tell us who this person is?
That looks like Johnny.
Do you know his last name?
I don't.
How do you know his first name is Johnny?
Janet and the children said there's this guy, that's Johnny out there.
Is that, in fact, him?
That is.
Does that photograph accurately depict the subject matter contained? In other words, is this an accurate, although not terribly complimentary, photo of Johnny?
Yes.
Move 26 into evidence, please.
No objection.
It's admitted.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Mesereau?
Yes. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Jackson, at some point you learned that Johnny was an investigator hired by attorney Mark Garrigus to see if your family and a bunch of lawyers were trying to extort Michael Jackson, true?
That would be incorrect.
You never called the police on Johnny, true?
No, sir, I did not.
And how many times do you think you've seen Johnny?
I have probably seen Johnny 3 times.
When was the first time?
The first time would have been the night that he showed up at the apartment and I confronted him out in front of my apartment door.
Okay, and then you say he took off?
He just walked away.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank you.
Your Honor, could I publish that photograph, number 26?
Yes.
Input 4, please.
If you could turn around and look behind you. Is that, in fact, exhibit number 26, the person you identified as Johnny?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. No further questions.
No further questions, Your Honor.
You may step down.
Thank you, sir.
Is your next witness?
Yes, it is.
To the jury. The next witness that is going to be called is Janet Arvizo, and it's necessary that I have a hearing outside of the presence of the jury before she starts her testimony. So I'm going to ask you to step out and we'll call you back in shortly. We will take our normal break as it occurs. So I suspect you'll have over half an hour here.
Did you want the witness in the courtroom?
Yes. Come to the front of the courtroom, please. When you get to the witness stand, please remain standing. Face the clerk and raise your right hand.
Yes.
Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
My name is Janet Jackson. Spelled Janet, Jackson.
Thank you.
Mrs. Jackson, are you formerly known as Janet Ventura and then Janet Arvizo?
Yes, sir.
And you currently go by Mrs. Jackson?
Yes.
And you are married to J. Jackson?
Yes.
Based on advice of counsel, have you advised the District Attorney's Office that you will be asserting the Fifth Amendment privilege as to any question asked of you about welfare recipients or applications for welfare during the period of time that you were on welfare?
Yes.
Up until the time that you discontinued welfare?
Yes.
No further questions.
Have you consulted an attorney regarding your claim of privilege here?
Yes, sir.
Is your attorney going to be here today?
No, sir.
Did you discuss the claim of privilege at length with him?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe you have sufficient knowledge to make the claim?
Yes, sir.
Do you feel you need any other legal advice concerning your claim of privilege?
Pardon me?
Do you need any other legal advice?
No.
What's the district attorney's intention as to how to deal with this?
Your Honor, my understanding is that this witness will answer all questions put to her other than questions of her welfare application. Questions that she answered in her welfare application or in receipt of welfare benefits. We intend on proceeding with our direct examination. We're not going to ask her any questions about welfare recipients. And I'm assuming that the assertion of the Fifth will be done at this time. And I don't believe that, well, our position is stated thereafter in our pleadings.
All right. Do you, in fact, make a claim under the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution against self-incrimination?
Yes, sir.
And to what areas do you relate that claim? Are you making that claim?
To what he said.
I'd like to hear it from you.
Of everything to do with the welfare, the application, the process.
During what time period?
The period of when I began till I ended.
But when was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. That was approximately October 2001 to November 2000. No, apologize. March 2003.
So the claim of privilege would involve claims made between October of 2001 and March, through March of 2003?
Yes, sir.
Has the district attorney considered giving this witness immunity on that issue?
We're not terribly interested in giving a grant of immunity.
All right. Points and authorities have been filed. And my thought is there's no reason for you to ask her any questions. But if you think there is, tell me why.
I don't believe Mr. Mesereau will be handling the witness, but I'm handling this legal issue, if we can bifurcate that, Your Honor. As far as the questions right now, I don't think there's any point in asking additional questions. The factual issue is set out.
All right. What I'm going to ask you to do is to step down from the witness stand, and just sit behind counsel while we have argument on this issue.
Thank you.
Your Honor, before we proceed, the court will note that Detective Victor Alvarez is currently in court. As the court knows, Steve Roble is out on family emergency for the week. And we've asked the court's indulgence to allow us to have a separate investigator here during the balance of the week. And I believe the court has said we could do that subject to the consent of the defense, and they've agreed.
We don't object to that. We didn't object to that. But we did talk to Mr. Zonen about this, and we do have 2 investigators, one in Los Angeles, and one up here. Neither one is going to be here routinely, but we had asked their consent to allow those 2 investigators to, either one to come in just one at a time. Mr. Zonen would not object to that, if that's all right with the court.
All right. Your agreement is fine with me.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Maybe, knowing you. It's not likely you're going to complete your argument in 2 minutes, is it? Laughter.
Not with that kind of encouragement, Your Honor. Laughter.
Let's take our break. And then we'll have our argument.